Yo, yo, yo. Welcome back into another edition of Jake's Takes. I am your host, Jake Massucci, and today we got another edition of the show for you guys. Today, we're back in college football. The Big Ten just floated out a 24 team playoff idea, and I'm like, oh my God, are we serious? I'm really looking forward to diving deep into it. We're going to break down the proposal, talk about what I think of it, and talk about how it might change college football. So, without further ado, I'm going to cue the music. All right, let's talk about this proposal. This thing is kind of crazy. So, the Big Ten, this came out Friday, and I was just reading about it on ESPN, and I figured, God, I gotta just record a podcast on it right now. I'm recording this Friday, February 13th. So, if something changes by then, whatever. So, let's talk about it. Big Ten is circulating an internal proposal outlining a potential expansion of the CFP. Of course, right now it's in at 12 games. They're going to move it up to 24 games. And the main thing that's really interesting about it is they're planning to eliminate conference championship games. The goal really is to add more on campus playoff games, which is interesting, definitely interesting there. CFP would remain 12 team format for the 2026 seasons. And then the Big Ten really wants it at 24 teams, and the SEC has shown support for the 16 team model that a lot of people think that's where it's headed next. So the Big Ten proposed the transition timeline to begin with the 16 team model and then move over into a 24 team model. The 16 team would go from 2027 to 2028, and then they move into the 24 team no later than the 2029 season. The 16 team model would be 5 automatic qualifiers and then 11 at large bids. Again, they changed it last year. So now, like, if Notre Dame is a top 12 team, going into this year, they changed it. If Notre Dame's a top 12 team, then Notre Dame's going to make it into the playoff. So, it would be similar to that. The 11 at large would be your top 16. And if the group of five's in the top 16, then they'll make it. But if they're not, etc. But they could still be the automatic qualifier, as they were this year, 2-team fashion. But the proposed 24 team format would then feature the 23 highest ranked teams and then still have that group of 5 member come in. They would have them as an automatic qualifier and be that representative. And then, of course, if you're in the top 23, you would be in the playoff as well if you're a Power 5 team or group of 5 team, that is. So it also includes avoiding regular season rematches in the first round, which if you're playing for 24 teams, that makes sense. You're not going to want to see, Indiana and Michigan, like if they were to both make it to the 24 team playoff and they played each other in the regular season, you wouldn't want to see that again, right? Especially if it was at Michigan and then they're going to play that game at Michigan again. They do the same thing in the March Madness tournament. Makes complete sense there. They also said, like, with the conference tournaments, they don't want to have those games because it would be unnecessary risk. There's pros and cons to this. I think from the pros and cons perspective, you're seeing the Big Ten think like, okay, conference championships. It's like fans have loved it since day one. It really represents, okay, like these are the top 2 teams in our conference. You get to let that go to display and let it happen on the field, like who's actually the better team if they don't end up playing this year. Like we wouldn't have known who was better if before Indiana and Ohio State played. Like they wouldn't have played a game this season, and you would have saw Ohio State lose first round, and then Ohio State fans still thinking, oh, we would have beaten Indiana. So I think that's a big thing. And the other thing is revenue, right? Like how you make so much revenue from that conference championship game. How are you going to replenish that? With having on-campus games, that's what they're hoping for. If more on-campus games, you're getting the 1s and 2s able to have on-campus games, it would be 100% huge. You'd be able to you'd be hopefully able to match that revenue. So I really think that stuff is interesting to kind of look at because of how much conference championships are valued, you know? And, the Big Ten believes also that a larger playoff format would mean maintain fan interest, especially because most of the teams are now playing in there. You got the top 23 teams, you're adding so many different teams to it, and all of those fan bases are, of course, following their teams. So the interest level would still stay the same, which I agree with. That's a completely fair point right there. So, initial reaction here to this a little bit. 24 teams just seems like too much. I think everybody's been discussing that for a long time, but you're looking at it and it's like college football was ending January 1st. You get that unbelievable semifinal game. Like I still remember, seeing CJ Stroud go up against Georgia in that unreal semifinal game and the Ohio State kicker missing the kick as as the ball dropped, right? And then you get January 7th national championship game. I love that timeline. Now you're looking at a 2014 playoff, and it's going up until late January, and we're already seeing it, the national championship going into late January. I don't know if that's like the best thing for the sport. um, it just seems like way too much. I was starting to grasp the idea of 12 and I was starting to like the idea of 12. It actually made me feel more interested in the game. And it's part of the reason the college football podcasts have also like gone up. My interest level in it has gone way up because there's so many different angles you can kind of attack it on. So I was starting to get used to 12 and now they're being like, oh, we want 16, we want 24, all this stuff. I don't know if it makes it any better. Another question that kind of came up in my head was like, does this make the regular season worse or better? I feel like it just makes it worse. A lot of these teams might start sitting their guys before the next week, being like, hey, we got to prepare. We can't have these guys injured before our playoff game. And then also we're seeing buys be a problem already. So you're asking the ones and twos to sit an extra week, and then they're going to have to go play 16s or whatever it is. And if they don't show up on their home field, you'll still see the ones and twos lose. So I don't see much of a benefit for the ones and twos. Like if you want more on campus games, okay, that's one thing. Like just have them play an extra round in this. Like if you have 16 teams, then everybody's playing an on campus game and each team gets one. And then you still have the bowls, So I don't see it making the regular season like better because I think there's more interest around the regular season with more teams being able to make the playoff, but the regular season just doesn't seem like the value still there. Everybody still wants to beat their rival, but like the old rivalries with Michigan, Ohio State, like it would mean a playoff berth, and now it just doesn't. Like the meaning of these games are kind of falling off in my opinion. So it just seems like too many teams and it seems like it's watering down the sport a little bit. I think it's good for the fans because if it's 24 teams, then you're getting 2 rounds of your favorite team. If you want to look at it that way, you're getting more access to going to big time events, which I love. I love the playoff being on campus. Like it's super cool. The atmosphere is electric. And I think game day does a great job of highlighting those electric atmospheres throughout the season and how much it means to these fans, and I would want to always have them at these games. Like it would have been so cool to see an Indiana home game this year. Like that Indiana fan base has never seen anything like this. They won their first national championship in the sport ever when they were statistically the team that lost the most throughout. So think about how much that place would have been jumping during a playoff game. It just would have been crazy. So my initial reaction here is it just seems like a little too many teams. And it seems like it's just making it a little bit worse. Like 24 teams just seems like a lot. I don't mind 16 teams. I've talked about it a lot with Neil, who came on the show a couple weeks ago. And, like 16 teams, all right, whatever. You're just getting rid of the buys. The buys have been a little bit a bit problematic for you, but especially with the ones and twos losing, and we've only seen one team that had a bye win in the second round, which was Indiana. So I think that part of it's really interesting. Now you're adding 24 teams. It just seems like a boatload, and it seems like it's gonna really kind of rip the meaning of the regular season when 23 of these teams are making it, you know? And what? Are we going to debate whether or not one team should be 24? Like, that's just crazy to me. I don't really know. Okay. Next question I had was conference title games. Like losing these conference title games, I think for all of the college football diehards that have been following it for so long, like I don't know what I would do. The Big Ten calling the title games like artificial. I feel like that meant something to me. We got to see 1 versus 2 early in the season, and to me, those were like the 2 best teams. We saw Miami like end up playing to that level, and they clearly beat Ohio State. They played a really, really good game to beat Ohio State. Like personally to me, Ohio State had way more talent than Miami. I think they were the way better team, but Miami just came in with a better game plan, better coach, and just more ready for that game. And I think Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor just give you such a talent level, like on that defensive line to affect a great offensive line that Ohio State had, which hurt them in that game and was the reason why Miami was able to kind of come up and win that game, the pressure they got on Sayin. So I feel like being able to see the top 2 teams, like I would miss the Big Ten championship. I would miss the SEC championship when those games were amazing. We got to see Alabama, Georgia for so long. Those are unbelievable games. And you're not guaranteed these games in a playoff format. You're just not, especially within a playoff format like this, where there's 24 teams. Some teams are getting buys. Some teams might have bad matchups, and then they lose. Like, I don't think you're going to get the best form of college football. You're just going to see some teams that get hot. And that's great in a sport like basketball with March Madness and stuff. And people can come in, have a hot game, and upset anybody. But are we getting the best talent out of the sport every time? I don't really know. I talked about it on a Final Four podcast last year. That was the first time we've had all 1 seeds in a very, very long time. And it was because of how good those 1 seeds were and how ready that they were to be able to make that happen. I don't think that's going to happen in football. You ask these guys to take a week off and their mindset just gets completely blanked. And now you're going up against another really good team that's already playing, that's already rolling, that's ready to go. That's why we've seen it with these, with coming off a bye. The team that's not coming off a bye is 7-1 in these games. And I think it's a clear thing where it's like, okay, like this is a problem when it comes to the playoff, like this is something where it's like, why are we having these buys, so the Big Ten calling these conference title games, I kind of went on a tangent there a little bit, but the Big Ten calling these conference title games artificial to me is just crazy because I want to see the best teams play. That's how I've always been. And I feel like when we get the 2 best teams out of the Big Ten and the 2 best teams out of the SEC from the regular season, those are meaningful games. They're fun games to watch. They really answer a ton of questions for me on whether I believe those teams are for real or not. So losing those games will hurt me as a college football fan, 1,000%. I don't really care about like money, revenue. They can figure all that stuff out. But for me, as a college football junkie that loves just watching the sport and watching the best teams go at it, I don't believe a 24 team playoff is going to be able to always give me that. In a conference title game, I'm almost always getting that. And that's where it hurts for me. If we're talking about power and money a little bit, I mean, the Big Ten and the SEC are really controlling this. That's why I wanted to do a podcast on this, because the Big Ten's really going to push for this. And the SEC is already pushing for the 16 teams. And for me, it's like, whatever. Okay. It just kind of gets rid of the buys, which I went on a tangent about and talked about how I don't believe buys are a great thing. So what the SEC is proposing, fine. 16 teams, that's great. If you're getting 24 teams, we still run into the bye problem and we still run into, okay, this is just too much. Like there's some teams that just aren't deserving of this. It's just too big. And we're pushing into February almost. It's just changing really fast, and I feel like it would be the biggest shift possible, and it would just be too big of a shift for me to really like it. Um, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the main picture when talking about it. I kind of jumped around a little bit, but when you're looking at these college football things, like a lot of people talk about, like there's good and bad. Some of the pluses of these changes is 12 teams draws way more fan interest. 100% true. The on-campus games, you get some of those like like on campus, ready to go, everybody rolling. That's great, and that's why I really like 16 teams. But if we're gonna move it up to 24 teams, I just don't believe that it's good for the sport overall. And I feel like we're actually going to miss out on games that we could have had because the Big Ten last year had the two best teams. The SEC throughout the last 10 years have had years where they've had the two best teams too. We've always gotten to see it because the playoff was small, 4 teams, and it was still able to happen. Georgia and Alabama might play again, and then last year we were able to get Indiana, Ohio State, who were the two best teams in my opinion last year because of a conference championship game. While it makes sense that the Big Ten is proposing a 24 team playoff, to me, it doesn't make sense getting rid of conference championship games that actually bring you the best matchups compared to expanding the playoffs and making it where the best matchups might not happen. All right, short podcast today. Really focused on the Big Ten 24 team thing. I'm recording this Friday, February 13th. So, things might change with this proposal and stuff, but I really wanted to break it down and actually go into some tangents like that I wanted to talk about within these playoff formats and everything that could happen within this. I really think it would be a big change for college football, and I don't think it would be a great one. I really don't. I truly believe that missing out on some of these great conference championship games would hurt the sport a lot. So, there's a lot that could happen this weekend. We're actually leaving for Robert Morris tomorrow, which is Saturday. That's part of the reason I wanted to get Reaction Monday out early. This was the main storyline I liked, so we're rolling with this one. Looking at the rest of the week, draft show tomorrow, and then we'll have Asher Smith on Wednesday. So thank you guys so much for listening, watching, subscribe on YouTube, and click those 5 stars on Spotify. I will see you guys next time. Peace.